Hello, welcome to Eye on Africa here on France 24. Let's take a look at stories making headlines across the globe. Police in Tanzania arrest 3 opposition leaders who were planning anti-government protests in the capital. We'll be unpacking the situation there with Fergus Kell, an analyst at Chatham House Africa programme. A court in Zimbabwe denies bail to over 60 opposition figures and activists. They were arrested back in June for planning demonstrations against the appointment of President Emmerson Mnangagwa as the chairperson of the Southern African Development Committee. And dozens of couples say "I do" to themselves during Morocco's Moussem of Imilchil. The event is one of the most highly anticipated in the country's cultural calendar. We begin in Tanzania, where police have arrested 3 leaders from the country's top opposition party in a bid to stop anti-government protests. The Chadema party had planned to flout an official ban on protesting and take to the streets in the commercial capital over the alleged kidnapping and killing of its members by security forces. For Chadema, it's the latest sign that President Samia Suluhu's Hassan government is returning the country to the repressive tactics of her predecessor. Well, let's unpack the situation in Tanzania with Fergus Kell, who is the project manager and research analyst at Chatham House Africa programme. Thanks so much for joining us on the programme, Fergus. We really appreciate your time. So Chadema had planned to have this protest today against the alleged disappearances and killings of its members. Lay out for us some of the context here.
Yeah, so I think the spark for these planned protests today has been an increase in abductions and arbitrary detentions of opposition figures from the largest opposition party in Tanzania, Chadema. But in particular, the most notable kind of spark for the current protests has been the recent assassination of Ali Mohammed Kibao, a member of Chadema's secretariat, who was found dead and with acid poured in his face, having been dragged off a bus by armed men earlier this month. So there's a sense of a ramping up of this arbitrary detention, of arrests of opposition figures, to challenge the opportunities for opposition to push back against the CCM ruling party in Tanzania, particularly ahead of local elections that are scheduled for the 27th of November this year.
And why did the government decide to ban these protests that were going to take place?
I think there is a degree of insecurity from the ruling party in that the president, Samia Suluhu Hassan, who's been in power for just over 3 years in Tanzania now, she came to power off the back of the sudden death of her predecessor, John Magufuli. And so her rise to the presidency came under uncertain circumstances. She wasn't appointed to the role through a process within CCM, as has been the past with previous presidents. And so she has never been tested at the ballot box. She has made attempts to gradually reopen some aspects of Tanzania's civic space following the more repressive style of her predecessor. But there is a sense of growing insecurity and nervousness from her administration ahead of these elections, and concern around the status of opposition pushback on government initiatives.
And Fergus, give us your thoughts on what critics are saying that, things like what happened today is further evidence that President Hassan is returning to the country's repressive tactics of her predecessor.
I think that there's this forms part of a wider pattern. So, as I mentioned, there's we shouldn't look purely at the events of today, but also at the arrests from back in August of several hundred opposition figures ahead of planned demonstrations on youth days. We could also look back to 2023 when we saw growing crackdown on opposition over protests aimed at a deal for Dubai Ports World to operate some elements of Dar es Salaam port. So I think there's a growing trend over the last 18 months here of increasing an increasing crackdown on opposition. And I think we should also remember in the Tanzanian context, given that the ruling party CCM is effectively synonymous with the state, has effectively full control of parliament and effectively a de facto one-party state in Tanzania, that we should also look at the dynamics within that ruling party. And I think there has been in the last 18 months a gradual pushing out of some of the more progressive and reform-minded elements of the CCM party in the lead up to these elections.
Fergus Kell, a project manager and research analyst at Chatham House Africa Programme. Thank you so much for joining us on the programme and giving us your thoughts there.
Thank you.
Next, a Zimbabwe court has denied bail to over 60 opposition figures and activists who have been detained since June. Police say they were arrested for planning protests against the appointment of President Emmerson Mnangagwa as the chairperson of the Southern African Development Committee. Some have since been cleared of those charges, but others remain behind bars. Tom Kinetti has more now from Cape Town.
So bad news for some of the over 160 people who have been detained in Zimbabwe since June. We were expecting today over 60 of them to be released on bail, but that was denied. These members of the opposition and activists were detained in June. Police alleged that they were conspiring to protest the president of Zimbabwe, Emmerson Mnangagwa, from becoming the chairperson of the Southern African Development Committee. Their lawyers, the detainees' lawyers, argue that the Constitution of Zimbabwe allows for freedom of assembly and called for the immediate release of their clients. But 3 months on, some of them are still behind bars. Let's take a listen to one of their lawyers today outside the courts on why they were denied bail.
Sure, they gave many reasons, one of which is that if admitted to bail, applicants would interfere, would not be, in fact, it would not be in the proper interest of the administration of justice if admitted to bail. That was the main reason given. And the other one is that the trial is commenced, it's now at the defense stage, and therefore very soon we should be concluding the trial.
Now, some of these detained activists claim that they were tortured by authorities when they were detained. One women's rights activist claimed that she had a boot stuffed in her mouth. Another teachers unionist appeared bloodied in his first appearance in court. Amnesty International claims to have evidence of this alleged torture. And all the more reasons to give critics another reason to say that the ruling party, who has been in power since 1980, is stifling democracy.
Today is World Sign Language Day, and we're going to be taking a special focus on Kenya because earlier this year the country passed a sign language law. The legislation ensures the right to have interpreters in all government agencies, including schools. Since 2010, the East African country has recognized sign language as an official language alongside English and Swahili. Elodie Cousin and Olivia Bizo have more.
Sign TV is a private Kenyan channel created for the deaf community. It airs daily shows on everything from entertainment to health, all in sign language. Mainstream TV channels are also becoming more inclusive, with news broadcasts featuring sign language interpreters. It's estimated that 3 million Kenyans are deaf, and many live on the margins of society. For the first time, the government is organizing a disability expo where they're promoting hearing aids.
Government made a deliberate effort, and they said this time round, we have to do production, assembling, repairs, and maintenance for the purpose of inclusion and equity in the society.
But hearing aids are expensive. They can cost up to 3 times an average salary. That's why the state is encouraging the use of Kenyan Sign Language and training about 150 people each year.
That is very true.
Go outside there.
So when they go outside there, they'll be able to bridge the gap which is there. And there will be no deaf person will be left.
The government is urging all teachers, doctors and civil servants to learn the national sign language.
It is Kenyatta Hospital which has sponsored me, and they have actually released me to come and do the sign language because I could be of help to the hospital.
A law passed last April requires every school to have a sign language interpreter. But it will take time for this to be fully implemented. Currently, fewer than 2% of deaf children have access to appropriate education.
We're going to end in Morocco because one of the country's top cultural events wrapped up this weekend. The Moussem of Imilchil sees 3 days of celebrations that accumulates in dozens of young people marrying officially. It's an Amazigh tradition that dates back to even before Arab Muslim influences reached North Africa. Here is Hao Jira with the latest.
7 a.m. and the village of Ul Khazi is just waking up. Muha Badrawi slips into his traditional attire. Today is a big day. He's celebrating his marriage in front of thousands at the Moussem of Imilchil. For him, this is a chance to showcase and honor his Amazigh heritage.
This is my jalaba and this is my traditional belt. This is what you need to attend the Moussem, to get married and to sign the marriage contract. Some people say that women are sold there because of the group celebration, but that's not true. We just go there to make our marriage official, following our customs.
Muha's wife remains out of sight. She wishes to stay discreet till the ceremony. At the Moussem, newlyweds are introduced to thousands of spectators. The event gets a lot of media attention. Muha and his wife try to stay under the radar, but for some in the community, this exposure is a necessary trade-off to ensure their traditions are recognized and safeguarded for the future.
Amazigh culture has not occupied as much space as it could have, partly because of religion, which promotes Arabic, as it's the language of the Quran. Despite this, there are many Amazigh events to avoid the marginalization of their culture in favor of Arab culture.
To prevent their culture from disappearing, the Amazigh communities also rely on their artists. Mohamed Slimani is a traditional orchestra conductor. He believes music is the best bridge between the Amazigh and other Moroccan communities.
Music is like a thread that connects Arabs and Amazighs in Morocco. Thanks to it, people meet and understand each other better. We are proud of this festival and our music, but also following the footsteps of our ancestors.
Traditions kept alive and now gaining international recognition. What began as an intimate gathering centuries ago has become a major event, drawing over 80,000 visitors this year alone.
Well, that's it from all of us on the Eye on Africa team. Thanks so much for your company and stay tuned to France 24.